Wargamers. Today I want to talk about the T'au Manta. That's the super heavy flyer for T'au. It's a giant model. It costs 2,500 points, so it's an army in itself. It also can transport a whole nother army. So, I said that I was going to review every T'au unit in Imperial Armour Index Xenos, and so that's what I'm doing. But this is a model that is clearly meant for apocalypse games, so keep that in mind. Basically, the short story here is if you want to bring a Manta, do whatever you want because it's gonna be crazy. So do whatever you want, but it's a really cool model. It's insanely large. It takes up like a couple square feet itself, and then it's just insane. So the stat line, we'll start with that. You can move up to 60 inches, which isn't crazy. It has a 5-up weapon skill. It has a ballistic skill of 2-up, which you would hope it would for something like this. Strength 8, toughness 8, 60 wounds, attacks 5, leadership 8, and a 3-up save. So 60 wounds, that's pretty beefy. It's not going to be taken out very quickly in a standard game. Even if you were just playing 2,500 points as your point limit and this was all you brought, it still would take a while to die. Now, if you're playing an apocalypse game that's 4,000 or 5,000 points, something greater than that, maybe that doesn't last very long. But as it is, 60 points or 60 wounds is quite substantial. It comes equipped with a ton of guns. Yeah, so it has 2 heavy rail cannons. Those are the 120-inch range macro rail cannon, strength 18, APE -5, 2d6 damage. Oofta. You got 2 of those on the Manta. You have 6 long-barreled ion cannons, which have range 96, heavy 3 shots, strength 7 or 8, -2 AP, and then 2 or 3 damage, depending on if you overcharge it. So that's nice. 6 of those. 2 missile pods, which are just the normal missile pod, and it's in the long list of weapons that this thing has. The 2 missile pods just kind of seem weird. Like, you have a ton of guns, and then it's like, oh yeah, 2 missile pods. All right. 16 long barrel burst cannons. So though it's a 36-inch range, heavy 4 burst cannons, same burst cannon that's on Remora. You got 16 of those. So that's a whole army's worth of pulse rounds there. You don't need a lot more than that. And then 10 seeker missiles. So a ton of output, hitting on 2s, especially if you're in hover mode, which you almost certainly will be just because of the size of the model. Hitting on 2s, and yeah, I wish that they would have mixed up the seeker missile a little bit. Like, it's kind of weird that it doesn't have destroyer missiles on it. I would think like, hey, maybe have 4 destroyer missiles and then 6 seeker missiles or something like that. But it's kind of fine. At this point, it doesn't really matter. So that's cool. But really where the Manta shines is in all of its other rules, and it's in its special rules. So you don't get to take advantage of as many of those special rules if you're playing like a 2,500 point game and you just bring a Manta. That's not as exciting. But if you're playing a 4,000 point list for an apocalypse game or something like that, I think the Manta actually can be a really strong component of that list and provide some really fun gameplay and kind of a cinematic narrative type of thing too. So I think if you're going to be bringing this guy, bring him at 4,000 points or above. For a 2,500 point game, I think it would be kind of boring unless you're just like, hey, let's see if this army can beat my Manta. Yeah, so it has the traditional flyer special rules: airborne, supersonic, crash and burn. That's nothing new. The things that are pretty cool about it are this thing called Colossal Flyer. Basically, what that does is you basically, instead of measuring to the actual model, you basic like look at the shadow of the model and measure to that. So you measure to the point where the hull would be if it were on the tabletop, and then unless the firing unit has fly, it is 12 inches further on the range. So if you have like a Space Marine with a flamer, he's never going to be able to hit a Manta with that flamer, because even if he's right underneath the Manta, he's always going to be 12 inches away. So unless you have fly, you add 12 inches to the distance measured, which is actually really cool. It means that a lot of Melta guns are not going to be able to actually use their Melta ability or use the Melta mechanic, because 12 inches is always going to be more than half of that range in most cases. Unless it's like a knight or something, you're still going to you're either not going to be able to hit it or not get as good of value out of the shot, which is cool. That's good. And I kind of like that, because it just symbolizes or represents the Manta being higher up in the air than a normal flyer, which is cool. It also has the normal -1 to hit, which you would expect, and it can fire heavy weapons even if it's moved without penalty, which is good, because there's a lot of heavy weapons on here, so that's good. It has the hover jet special rules, so it can go into hover mode, which again, like I said, you're basically going to need to do, because it's going to be impossible to move this guy. And then it has a transport elevator special rule, which basically just says that any units that are disembarking from the Manta have to be set up within 3 inches of the rear hatch, which can actually be somewhat difficult if you were to pack this guy full. It would be really difficult to actually fit all of those models within 3 inches of the back port, which basically just means that you have to plan ahead. So don't try to like unload the entire army in one go. But on that note, the transport capacity is also a really big component of the Manta, and it's kind of insane. So it's broken up into 2 different parts. There's an upper deck and a lower deck. The upper deck can take 55 models, and those 55 models can only be comprised of infantry and drones. So Pathfinders, Fire Warriors, any type of drone. Even stealth suits could be on the top deck. If you look at the actual model, it has a bunch of Fire Warriors sitting down in like a little row of drones, but you can put whatever you want up there, so long as it has the infantry or drone keyword. The lower deck actually has a 145 model carrying capacity for infantry and drones, and then it can take up to 8 crisis suits, hazard suits, or commanders, which is kind of weird. Like, you can take a total of like 200 infantry, but only 8 crisis suits. Why only 8 crisis suits? But yeah, you can take up to 8 crisis suits. So if you're playing a Farsight army, if you're playing a suit heavy army, maybe this isn't for you. But if you're playing an infantry heavy army, then Manta will gladly transport your army plus some around the tabletop. In addition to all those things, you can take up to 4 devilfish or hammerheads in there as well. And if you have devilfish in your Manta, you can have units embarked in the devilfish too. So it's basically Russian nesting dolls in terms of transport capacity. You can have Fire Warriors and the devilfish plus all the Fire Warriors on the second level and on the first level. So you can take a tremendous number of Fire Warriors in your Manta if you wanted to. But yes, that's basically it. It does have a energy shield special rule, which is a 4-up invulnerable save. That's really nice because it makes those Melta weapons even less useful against it. And in an apocalypse game, you're going to want to have an invulnerable save. So it's pretty darn durable. Overall, I think this is a model that no one would take in a normal competitive setting, but if you are playing an apocalypse game, I think it's awesome. I think it really can lend a lot to a 4,000 or 5,000 point army. I think at a 3,000 point level, it can even do something too, but your whole army is going to be the one model, and maybe you want to mix it up a little bit more. I don't know. So cool model, cool rules, tons of guns, lots of armor, hard to kill. That's about it. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and of course, happy wargaming.